let's talk about that. Welcome to the conversation where we will highlight several different ministries and various topics of things, well, that we just want to talk about. Sit back, relax, and join in the conversation.
Hey Newberg, Kyle Berry here, your Director of Music and Worship Arts. I'm here to start off our new Friday series called Let's Talk About That. Throughout this series, your church staff is going to be talking with different people in ministry about all kinds of different subjects. I'm going first, obviously, and I'm going to be talking with three very close friends of mine, Caleb and Naomi Barrett and Brian Jansen. We're going to be talking about serving others through doing ministry in different cultures. Caleb and Naomi Barrett are going to be here, like I said. Caleb is from Connecticut originally, and Naomi's from Minnesota, but they are currently serving a church in Hawaii. It's very different from what they're used to, so they're going to have some really neat insights. Brian Jansen also is in a different place from what he's used to originally. He grew up in a little town called Antigo, Wisconsin. Now he serves as a tech director at a church and an AV company here in Detroit. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Feel free to like, share, talk about it, comment on the video, and we'll see you on the other side. So we're all doing things differently because of the quarantine, but each of us have also been doing things differently in our ministries for other reasons. Specifically, Brian, I know you're originally from Wisconsin. Antigo is a pretty rural town in Wisconsin. And now you're in big city Detroit. And kind of the same thing with Caleb and Naomi. Caleb's from Connecticut, Naomi from Minnesota. I've not seen where you live, Caleb, but I've seen where Naomi's from. And coming from there, now you're in Hawaii, and that's a kind of a big change too. So I want to hear kind of your guys' thoughts on ministering in a different culture from what you're used to from where you're from.
Well, I'll say something to that, because here is basically the opposite of Connecticut. Like, in every way, shape, and form. And I'll say it took a while to get used to in a lot of different ways. One of the biggest things is that people are a lot more open here. So people say that when you're from Connecticut, you're less friendly. It's less that and more just you're more hesitant toward people. But here, you're auntie and uncle like right away. Like, I went into the preschool and one of the little kids was like, "Uncle, watch this." And I'm like, "I have never seen you before, but all right." And that's just the culture here. Like, that's what she grows up with. You're a big guy, so you must be uncle. But it helps a lot in a lot of ways because I'm able to more easily talk to people. And there's, as much as people are hesitant toward Christianity for a lot of reasons, they're more open to talk to Christians. I've met a lot of people that are like, "Oh, you're a pastor, that's cool. I don't go to church, but I respect that a lot." But it still gives me an opening to talk to them in different ways.
I'm still thinking.
Well, for me, like being in Detroit, honestly, I've always had the mindset that I was going to move around a lot because, like, we all know that the best way to move up in ministry is to either like land a perfect like unicorn church where you get into a position where you are able to grow respect already, and then having that in combination of having a pastor that really wants to develop you and develop your leadership skills and then elevate you, like those two things typically don't come hand in hand, because I feel like a lot of churches that like they hire you and then like they kind of they kind of put you in your role and people just stay happy in their role. And most churches aren't big enough really to have their own careers built into them anyways. Like the best way to grow is by switching churches. And so I always had the mindset that I was going to do that, and moving here and essentially getting my dream job, like right out of the gate, where I was the production director for a campus at a mega church, and then having that disappeared really quickly, like 2 weeks before getting married. It's super weird because I didn't think that I would leave full-time ministry for any significant amount of time. Like, I don't think I'm definitely not done with it. Like, I'll be back in full-time ministry when God decides it's time, but I never expected to be in this period of embracing part-time ministry and the freedom that comes with it. But I've decided to stay because Detroit is such a perfect spot, especially, like, at least for me. Not only because of like friends and family in the community I've built here, but because like going from Anago, small rural town, Wisconsin, a lot like where Naomi comes from. Like, you guys were there, like on band tour when we went through the Midwest. And it's just like very small conservative town, a lot of older folks, and it's shrinking. And but everyone who still lives there and works, they're hard workers. Like, there just aren't lazy. Well, there's lazy people, but they're on drugs. But really, like, anyone who's not living a bad lifestyle there, like in the drug community, which is unfortunately high, is like a very hardworking, very work ethic focused community. But it's really interesting to have moved here and not expect to actually put roots down somewhere, but find a place that I identify with culturally strong enough to where I understand, like, God wants me to stay here. My calling is to the Detroit area more so than just being called into full-time ministry, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that because I feel like that's where we are right now. I mean, we were called here. We thought we were called here for music and AV. And I mean, I'm pastor of music and outreach, but I feel like it was more that we were called to serve in this church because of major transitions that they've been going through that they didn't anticipate. And it's not that I'm just that good that they needed me for that, but me and the other pastor who they hired 2 months after me being able to work together is seeing them through this in a major way. So it's, yeah, I'm here doing music ministry, but I'm doing way more to make sure that everybody's okay through not just the virus, but also through this kind of transition. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I understand what you're saying by that. Like, called to the area more than called to the specific church.
Yeah, and I guess for me living here, it's weird because, yeah, it's Hawaii. It's completely different culture from anything that most people, unless you're here, you wouldn't know how it is. But in a way, it's almost like coming back to my roots, and like, I know that roots.
The Minnesotan slipped out there.
Because of the laid backness, it's like you're living on this partial country, partial city island. Oahu is the most city of the islands, but it feels a lot more laid back, and in that way I feel at home, and like I can open up to people. And there's also that, Brian, you talk about like work ethic and all of that. Even though these people are like, they'll go to the beach on the weekends and they're hike and they'll live it up, but during the week they're hard workers. Like, they're all about family, and you're going to work for your family. So I appreciate that. It's also strange because, like, how I grew up, it was like people would act kind, like it's like the culture was very welcoming, but then when you go away from whoever you're hanging out with. Like they have all these horrible things to say about you. But then also in some ways, that is also here, but it's more as, I get it with working in the preschool because most of the lead teachers that are there are Asian, and there's just something about not wanting to tell you exactly to your face when there's an issue. Yeah, it's like you don't want to disrespect, and here that's seen as like, I don't want to show you dishonor. So that's something like getting used to, like they're not going to directly talk to you and tell you that there's an issue. They're going to tell someone else and hope that it gets to you. So that's also a weird thing here. So
sounds like it'd be hard to know when you're on the right path or not.
Yes, that is exactly everything. That's been a lot of the stuff here in general, but it's more to what you're saying with that in certain places that I've been. So in Connecticut, if somebody has a problem with you, they're going to tell you. In the Midwest, I'm going to pretend that I'm nice, but then I'm going to complain to everybody and hope you don't hear. Here, they'll be like, this has been frustrating, but hope that like the problem gets solved. But more so when they're being nice to you, that is what it is. Like it's the aloha spirit. Like you want to make sure that everyone that is here is taken care of. And it's interesting in different ways. So even so our pay hasn't been interrupted, but still people are bringing us stuff to make sure that we're okay because they're not sure if our pay's interrupted. So one of our deacons brought me and the other pastor 12 eggs each. He's like, I was there. Want to make sure all are good. People have brought me treats that I don't need that are lupia, which is like fried bananas. It's a Filipino thing, but it really is an aloha spirit. It's not we're doing this because we're supposed to do this because this is our culture. It's we're doing this because we want to make sure everybody's okay and we want to love on everybody, which is a very nice thing.
So the other question I want to hear you guys answer. I mean, we went to Trinity together. Caleb and Naomi went to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary for their master's in music. We've all had training in ministry, but obviously that can only teach you so much until you actually get into full-time ministry. So how has coming into a new culture and coming into just ministry full-time for a couple of years in general, how has that kind of changed how you do ministry?
So one of the big things in general, and this is something that we've all talked about because the three of us have, and Naomi too, but I think the three of us had more of these kinds of conversations about specific aspects of theology and where we disagree. And I think it's less the theology we disagree about and more the practical side of it. Because I focused a lot on the ivory tower type of theology. Like this is what's going to go in these kind of textbooks that I have laying around everywhere. And sometimes it's not going to be the way it works, even though it's ideal. We know from the fall that literally things aren't the way they're supposed to be. But it's that now you need to take those principles, and I see it through a New Englander's eyes. Now I need to take those things and apply it to a culture to make sure that culture has what they need in different ways. So one example with music is I don't necessarily want to change those things that I think are essential in worship, but I want to make sure that they communicate the right things to the people. So in a worship service, I'll give this example. I in Texas, I always wear a suit. Didn't always wear the tie, but I always either had the coat or tie on. I remember one time, Kyle, we were at West Sub, and you were like, I can't not wear something nicer. Like, it wasn't suit and tie, but it was something a little bit up. But
right.
here,
a button up or something, yeah.
Yeah. Well, here, if you wear a suit and tie, it's going to be distracting. Like, I'm wearing an Aloha shirt, and this is what I wear on a Sunday morning. And it's that I'm making sure that, you know, it's clean and hopefully ironed and not wrinkled, and it's a little bit nicer than what I would wear Monday through Friday, which isn't hard given that I wear shorts and flip-flops most days. But it's using that same principle of being a little bit better, but making sure it's not going to be distracting, making sure it's not like, ooh, what are you so dressed up for? Kind of an aspect.
I was pretty, as far as culture goes, I was always pretty strategic about like positions that I accept, like at any church that I've done any degree of ministry in. Once I kind of learned that there was different church cultures, because growing up, all I knew was Peace Lutheran, Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, which is very liturgical, very traditional. That's all I knew. I didn't think there was any other different type of church than that. And then in high school, like after I became a Christian, I started going to an Evangelical Free Church of America, and I started learning that there are different styles and different like church cultures, even within the same denomination. Because like Evangelical Free Church of America over in Antigo, Wisconsin looks very different than E-Free down in Georgia. Very different experiences, especially politically right now. Very different experiences. And just being the experience that I have growing up in a few of those different churches, and then really taking the time to dive into a church while in college, because like I think it took me 14 months to actually start attending a church from when I started going to Trinity, just because I was being really picky about where I went to. So part of it was laziness, I'm not going to lie, but being picky about the culture that I kind of dive into it's made things just a little bit easier as far as really diving in and really being able to engage in ministry quickly, because I'm not experiencing as much culture shock. So coming here and experiencing the different culture here versus what I had in Chicago, or in Deerfield. I keep forgetting that you guys know exactly what I mean when I say Deerfield. But experiencing Deerfield, where even at North Sub, where it was a bit more casual, like there was still there was still like people who dressed up nice, and then there were people like me that wore shorts and flip-flops every day, showed off their tattoos, and just like people looked at him like, what's he doing here? And there was a good mix of that there. But here, like Kensington, nobody wore a suit at Kensington except for on holidays, like because it's an event, like you want to dress up, you want to look cute with the fam, and all that, make an event of it. So but for the most part, you didn't get dressed up at Kensington. The only reason I didn't wear flip-flops was because my job required that I wore closed-toed shoes, because road cases will squash your toes irreparably. And so being able to be picky and stay like more or less in a culture that I understood, just because I'm a pretty casual guy, but obviously I'm a pretty casual guy, and it's really I feel like it helped remove barriers. Like I know this isn't really a great way to answer your question, because you're looking for like how have you adjusted, but I haven't really had to adjust. I've been able to just like dive in and be like, hey, this is who I am. I don't have to put on any sort of mask. I don't have to pretend. I don't have to wear button-ups, which aren't something. I wear button-ups during the summer, but there's also a puff of chest hair poking out most of the time. And that's something I don't have to stop doing, because I'm just very strategic. Because when my boots land on the ground, I want to be in that boots on the ground mode. I want to be moving forward. I want to be getting to know my volunteers, like on a personal, like deep level, to where we're texting each other throughout the week, and because like as you guys probably have experienced, like when you enter into a new ministry role and potentially replacing somebody, you're not going to make everyone happy. Like when when I went to Kensington, I wasn't really replacing somebody, and people still got their feathers ruffled because why is there this 24-year-old guy telling me, a 60-year-old man, how to push desks across the room? And it's like, because honestly, you're pushing them in the wrong direction. You got to follow the chart there, bro. But like, obviously, you're going to run into, there's going to be hurdles that you run into. And I just really wanted to be strategic about picking churches where I knew I fit in, where I could be the most genuine, because I know if I can be genuine, that encourages my team to be genuine with me, and the relationship and the trust that's just built there, it reaches a greater level and gets to a point that I would really like it to go.
And that's really great that you could find those churches that work with that. Like, it's kind of a rarity to find a church that you feel comfortable enough to be yourself. And that's something that I've yet to, I mean, I've found that in some, but it's, I guess Caleb talks about the ideal, and that's a big thing that I've learned in ministry is like, you learn what the ideal is and what you would want and how you would want to, let's say, order a worship service, or the types of musics that you want to choose. But then when you get to the church that God has led you to, sometimes it's not going to be that ideal, and you kind of have to adjust and like kind of figure out how they do things first. Or even here, like, you know, it'd be great if we had access to people that, you know, played orchestra instruments, or like anything other than like the standard drums, bass, you know, guitar. But this is what we have, and it's great, and we can work with it and make it sound great, you know. I know that when I was at White Settlement Baptist Church as pianist, they gave me opportunity to do the evening services for a short time. And then after a few weeks, actually shortly before we came here, they were like, oh, well, this isn't quite working. We're just going to have the other guy do it. And I'm like, you know, looking back at it, I'm like, maybe I was just being too ideal. Maybe I was just trying to fit something that I wanted to work into, changing things how something different that they weren't used to. I don't know.
Well, and it's also something of learning how to do it gradually. So this is something, Kyla, you and I have talked about a lot, that if you know what your ideal is, and even if they hire you to do that ideal, if you come in and change it from 0 to 60 in the first 4 weeks, it's not ideal anymore. It's going to be more distracting than helpful. It could be the right way to do things, but it doesn't work that way. So if you go to a Texas country church and start ordering it liturgically without letting them get used to it, and I don't think your ending there had anything to do with that. I think it was other stuff, but it more just gives them whiplash.
Yeah.
Than anything. And
That's
I
a good
think
way of putting it.
that's just such an important thing, because here it's not that they were against anything I wanted to do. It's just they needed to take time to get used to it and make sure that I wasn't trying to change them.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in Hawaii, that's big. I'm not from here. I don't look like I'm from here. They have a word for people that look like me, and it's not always said in the friendliest of ways.
Yeah.
But they wanted to understand why, and that I had the ideal interest that I could explain it, and that I wanted to find the best way for us to authentically worship God, not that I want to order this like I did it at my last church because that's the way I like to do it. And they've kind of gotten used to it, and they mostly trust me at this point.
Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of what I was hoping this conversation would turn up, is the idea that all ministry is about relationships. That's really the basics of it. that's the core foundation, is how you interact with the people you're working with, and not just if you are a pastor or a music director or a tech director like us. It's even if you are just, the person who works in an office, or you have any other job that's not in a church, you're still involved in ministry, and that ministry starts with having relationships with the people around you, cultivating good relationships with them so that they, another person can trust you, and then showing them what the love of Christ looks like in the context of that relationship. Anyway, thank you guys for taking your time and talking with us. Greatly appreciate it. I hope to see you soon, though others from my church probably won't, but yeah, thank you guys, and we'll talk to you later.